Hello and welcome to the Social Talks, an independent, public, digital news platform that generates news, stories and editorials on pertinent issues that affect the contemporary youth. I'm your host, Karima Farouk, with today's story. The nation of France has been seething with protest against French President Emmanuel Macron's unpopular pension reform that was controversially bulldozed through the National Assembly without a vote. Referring back to his re-election campaign in 2022, President Macron promised to increase the pension age from 62 to 65, bartering at 64. His government have now implemented this reform, preparing to increase the pension age from 62 to 64 by 2030. The reform also brings an end to previous so-called special regimes, such as different age requirements for different professions such as railway, electricity and gas workers. It does, however, maintain lower age requirements to receive pension for certain categories that are deemed mentally and physically challenging, such as police officers and firefighters. The reform also increases the guaranteed minimum pension for low-income workers to 85% of the net minimum wage. The French government argue that it is a necessary reform to ensure that the pension system is financially viable and sustainable to prevent future financial deficit with an aging population. Nevertheless, the decision sparked public and oppositional party protests that began on the 19th of January 2023 and continue to grow increasingly furious in the present. Protesters are angered not just by the reform itself, but also with the manner through which it was passed through. After being passed through a Conservative-dominated Senate by 195 to 112, the bill was meant to proceed to voting from the National Assembly where opposition would have blocked it. However, Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne announced that she would trigger Constitutional Article 49.3 to force the bill through without a vote, preventing opposition from blocking reform. Her announcement of this declaration was faced by the opposition singing the national anthem in assembly over her speech. Unions report that over 3.5 million protesters also took to the streets in protest, with over 80% of the public believing that this was a mistake according to polling. Further polling suggests that 2/3 of the French public oppose reforms. This reflects in the 8 main trade union bodies in France unusually uniting to create multiple days of national action. Police have clashed with demonstrators. Some protests turned violent and hundreds have been arrested during months of protests. Streets are piled high with reeking garbage that are piling and left uncollected by striking workers. Police and environmental activists also clashed over the weekend in rural France, resulting in dozens of injuries. Over 4,000 non-lethal dispersion grenades have been fired by police officers to fend away hundreds of protests, launching items such as rocks, fireworks and gas bombs upon police lines. The public is furious with not just the prospect of working for longer, but also the controversial means through which President Macron has imposed this reform. This leads to question the future of President Macron's governance and inevitably provokes questions as to if the bill is an attack on democracy. For now, this has been Karima Farouk from the Social Talks.